What in the wide world of sports? What if, instead of standard tuning being EADGBE, your guitar was tuned to EADGCF with symmetrical fourths? I'm David Harsh with Guitar Success for You, and to better serve our viewers and subscribers, I've created this video. A YouTube short we uploaded recently on this topic got an incredibly positive response. So today, I'm going to explore why standard tuning works so well, but also why the guitar isn't typically tuned in symmetrical fourths. I'll do a side-by-side comparison and show you the implications for scales, arpeggios, open chords, and even movable chords when the guitar is tuned in fourths. I'll also show you another instrument I play that is tuned in symmetrical fourths on the treble side, and what the pros and cons are of the tunings for each of these instruments. Also, if you want to be able to tune your guitar in fourths with less risk of string breakage, I'll show you how to do that in a way you might not have even thought about. Lastly, I'll show you what happened when I left my fourths-tuned guitar out for one of my students to try playing without any warning. I've never seen or shot a video like this, and I may never do it again. We'll see. Once you get to the end, I would value a constructive comment about what you learned. I'm really hoping today's lesson will be interesting, but also informative and applicable to your guitar journey. Let's get started. The guitar is an instrument that has quite a bit of history, and some folks talk about how some early music instruments have influenced standard tuning. Certain permutations of the lute, for example, include a multi-stringed instrument with a tuning that can accommodate certain shapes for melodies and chords. Other stringed instruments, like the mandolin, are tuned in symmetrical fifths. The bass guitar can emulate the low 4 strings of a 6-string guitar, but an octave lower, typically playing 1 or 2 notes simultaneously. A guitar has quite a bit of versatility because it's used to play melodies and chords. And if we want to play chords especially, we need to consider where the notes are that can make optimal voicings possible. Today, I'll be playing 2 different guitars. This one is my Taylor Dreadnought, and it's tuned to standard tuning with E, A, D, G, B, and E. You've probably heard of memory devices from low to high, like Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Or we can go from high to low with E, B, G, D, A, E, with the memory device Easter bunnies get dizzy at Easter. That's standard tuning. This guitar is my Taylor Cutaway, and it's tuned to symmetrical fourths with E, A, D, G, C, and F. By the way, this is the counterclockwise appearance of some of those keys on the circle of fifths, because we're moving in fourths, right? As you may have noticed, I'm also wearing a rather stylish fedora while I'm playing this guitar. So if you're wondering which guitar I'm playing at a moment's notice today, just think fedora, fourths. Fedora, fourths. Cool? Let's talk for just a moment about what the intervals are between the strings in standard tuning. The guitar is tuned mostly in perfect fourths, but when we get to strings 3 and 2, we have what? A major third. That is a departure from the fourths. So the intervals in standard tuning are perfect fourth, perfect fourth, perfect fourth, major third, and perfect fourth. By contrast, with my Cutaway, we have uniform symmetrical fourths all the way across. I've kept this guitar in this fourths tuning for a couple weeks just to get used to exploring what it feels like to play it. Let's take a quick look at a couple major scale forms. Some people like to play 3 notes per string uniformly across the strings. When I switch to fourths tuning, the unique notes will turn purple on strings 2 and 1 on my diagrams. Here's a G scale in standard tuning with this 3 notes per string approach. Let's have a look at the 3 note per string G major scale on the fourths tuned guitar. As it turns out, that's actually a little bit more accessible. Okay, what about a major scale form with only a 4-fret spread to keep the position playing a little bit more consolidated? You might play your scales like this. Here's what that more condensed scale form would look like on a 4ths tuned guitar with a 5-fret spread. This actually involves a permanent position change where there wasn't one before. How about arpeggios? Let's go minor for a second. Here's a G minor arpeggio on the standard tuned guitar with no position change. And then a G minor arpeggio on the 4ths tuned guitar, which has a permanent position change. But now let's talk about some chords. This is where the game changes significantly with these tuning differences. By the way, if you want my take on 10 chords you need to know, please watch this video, which contains several chords beyond what I'll share with you now. Since we've been hanging out with a tonal center of G, let's do some chords in G major. To distinguish the shapes in standard tuning from 4ths tuning, I'll again use purple for the fretted notes in the 4ths tuning on my diagrams. I like to play G on a standard tuned guitar like this. Let's see what G major looks like on a 4ths tuned guitar. It works, but it's more of a handful by comparison, right? How about A minor? Random fun story for you. I played a concert at a camp once where 2 guys walked around with guitars and strummed and sang A minor. It was a little weird, but when the time came for me to do my show, I got up and I said, okay, true or false? My favorite artist is Alicia Keys. The audience said, false. I said that's correct, but I do appreciate that she does have an album called Songs in A minor. And they were eating out of my hand the rest of the night. So A minor is a chord we learn early on. Let's see what the implications are for an open A minor chord on the 4ths guitar. We could fret A minor like this. A minor. B minor is typically a bar chord in standard tuning if I want to be in root position. On the 4ths tuned guitar, this B minor chord would also be what I'd call a bar chord, but only on strings 5, 4, 3, and 2. Don't let that first string G ring out. Yuck, right? Moving up the G major scale, we have C major on the 4 chord. One of the early chords we learn on the guitar. With a 4ths tuned guitar, C major would look like this. D major is another essential chord. On a 4ths tuned guitar, to make this same D major voicing happen, we sort of have to make a shape that looks like A minor, but on an adjacent set of strings. Same notes, a couple new frets. Then we have E minor, which is quite easily accomplished on a standard tuned guitar. A 4ths tuned guitar is another story entirely for E minor. To make this happen, we'd have to voice it like this. Quite tricky when compared with the original E minor chord in standard tuning. So to summarize chords thus far, here are the 6 chords many of us know in G major on a standard tuned guitar. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and E minor. And here are the 6 new shapes we've discovered in the 4ths tuning. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and E minor. There are more chords out there than we can count, but let's quickly grab an F major chord. On a 4ths tuned guitar, since the top 2 strings are already C and F, we could play F major without the top 2 strings fretted. Check this out. But now we encounter a serious challenge: movable bar chords. These rely on a close position shape, often across all 6 strings. Here's an A flat bar chord in standard tuning on the 4th fret. If I want to voice a 6-string movable chord at this same 4th fret location on a 4th tuned guitar, and I change nothing about the shape of my hand with all the notes fretted, it sounds really bad. The reality is that I can't have my cake and eat it too. Look at this diagram. I'd need an extra finger to play all 6 strings for that major bar chord voicing. I'd need 6 fingers on one hand. But that's inconceivable. So the 4th tuning breaks down when it comes to playing full 6-string bar chords. It's just not possible. Unless I do something unorthodox like this. I have the left hand fretting the low 4 strings and the right hand tapping the high 2 strings. We could get there with this unconventional approach. Now, you may know that I love to do 2-hand tapping on the guitar, and many years ago I discovered, researched, and custom ordered an instrument that allows me to do that on a whole new level. It's called the Chapman Stick, invented by the late, great Emmett Chapman of Los Angeles, California. I actually got to meet this guy many years ago when I ordered this instrument. This particular model is called the Grand Stick because it has 12 strings. As you can see, instead of a strummed instrument, this is a tapping instrument. The bass side of the Chapman Stick has 6 strings tuned in descending fifths. And the treble side also has 6 strings, and it is tuned in, you guessed it, symmetrical ascending fourths. Like a 6-string guitar would be if it was tuned in fourths. Typically, if I were playing right-hand chords, they would only consist of about 3 harmonic notes at the same time. On a 4th tuned instrument, whether the treble side of the stick or a 4th tuned guitar, the shapes all become geometrically consistent across the strings. As long as we play just a few notes on sequential strings, we don't run into challenges. Watch as I play triads in different inversions across the 4th tuned guitar neck and then across the 4th tuned stick. The shapes won't change. We can go to minor too. Check out root position, 1st inversion, and 2nd inversion minor triads on both instruments. We can do power chords too. By the way, have you seen our next level power chords video here on the channel? I teased today's discussion in that video. The video is right here if you want to go deep and be inspired with your power chords artistry. But here are power chords across a symmetrical 4ths tuned guitar. And here they are on the stick. Not too shabby. I'd like to talk about pros and cons of 4ths tuning for a moment. And then I have a practical way for you to unlock the 4ths tuning on your guitar without the risk of breaking strings. Plus, a quick glimpse of a fun prank I played on one of my students with this tuning. Before we continue though, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. If you want more content like this, you'll want to know when it becomes available, right? Thanks for your support. So if you were to ask me what the pros and cons are of fourths tuning, I would say that the main pro is the geometric consistency, especially with partial chord voicings. We don't have to modify the shape of the chords as we play them around the fretboard. The con, however, is how challenging it is to voice basic chords, some of which are open, but especially the bar chords. Some guitarists out there dedicate their careers to playing only in fourths tuning, and they work within the limitations of the tuning while accessing new sounds that standard tuning wouldn't allow for. I haven't been won over by symmetrical fourths tuning yet, but I love to explore a variety of other alternate tunings that lead to all kinds of sonic adventures with voicings that would never be possible in standard tuning. But if you want to get into fourths tuning, let me show you a way to reconfigure your guitar that won't involve tuning strings 2 and 1 up and risking extra tension on the neck or even string breakage. Here's the secret. What if we tuned strings 6, 5, 4, and 3 down a half step? Would that solve it? You bet it would. Watch. We now have the pitches E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, which is also F sharp, which is a perfect fourth below B, which is a perfect fourth below E. We have perfect fourths across the strings. And for those who are like, dude, but now I'm in a flat tuning and I actually want to jam up a half step with people in standard tuning, all you need to do is throw your capo on fret 1 and you have the fourths tuning I've been playing in on my cutaway for today's lesson. Now my dreadnought is in fourths tuning. Hey, how'd that fedora get up there? If you've got friends who play the guitar and you really want to mess with them, tune your guitar to fourths, leave it in a place where they'll find it and try to play it, and watch what happens. I pranked one of my Guitar Success for You members with a fourths tuned guitar. He picked it up and tried playing it, and I delighted in watching him squirm just a bit. He's a very accomplished musician, so it was interesting to see his reaction. He started to test the strings next to each other and realized there was a change in the tuning almost immediately. Then he pivoted to try to play some chords in this new fourths tuning. He realized that the chords he wanted to play would have to be altered in shape to accommodate strings 2 and 1.
Not as comfortable as...
Then he asked a great question partway through, which was interesting because I hadn't even prepped him for today's topic. Check this out.
Is this about why the guitar is tuned the way it is?
Yeah. Pretty interesting experiment, I'd say. Now, I would draw the line at tuning your worship leader's guitar to fourths right before he or she goes onto the platform on Sunday morning, though. That would be too far. Too far. Hey, speaking of the worship platform, the next video you're going to want to check out if you're at all interested in playing your guitar for your local church is this one. Because in it, I unpack the 6 skills you must have to be a good candidate for the team. These skills apply to other band settings as well. I'll see you there.